Africa, Africa. Gonna make a list from big. Gonna make a list from biggest to small. Gonna make a list from.
What's your kid's way to discover? Like a precision engineer? Like a demolition expert? Or a treasure hunter? What's your kid's way? Kinder Surprise. 1,000 ways to love it.
Forest Keepers. Hazard level B, they take 30 hits to kill, they will insta-kill you, they have a max spawn of 3 and are most commonly found on Vow. Forest Keepers have 3 phases: roaming, chasing, and searching. When a Forest Keeper first spawns, it'll climb out of the ground, then enter its roaming phase. Giants have a field of view of 50 and can see 70 meters away. Shout out to Addy for this field of view visual that you'll be seeing throughout the entire video. I've already explained this phase in my Jester video, but I will be explaining it again because there's a small mechanic that makes Forest Keepers a little different, and I will be clarifying search width, which isn't something I've covered yet. As you can see, there are small spheres placed around the entire outdoor map. These are called nodes, and it's what giants use when they're roaming. When a giant first spawns, it will choose the closest node and walk towards it. Once the giant gets close enough, it will check that node off, choose another node, and do the same. It will continue to do this process until it spots a player. Keep in mind the giant will not target a node that has already been checked off unless this phase is reset. In this phase, giants have a function that causes them to stop and look around. This function has a random chance of happening once the giant reaches a node. Giants have a search precision of 8 meters, which just means that once a giant is 8 meters away, when the butler enters, as soon as the my screen, you can when the butler enters his lingering phase, he will immediately slow down. Today is Lethal Company's 1 year. When the butler enters his lingering phase, he will immediately slow down, begin sweeping, and set the player he's seen as the target player. Understanding how the butler acts with the target player is the most important part of the butler. As soon as the butler spots a player, they become the target player. A 12-second timer will begin where the butler will linger around the target player. If the butler loses line of sight of the target player, then he'll simply check the last location he saw them. Right before this timer is up, the butler will turn and look for other players. If he doesn't spot anyone, then he will attack the target player. If the target player isn't in line of sight when the timer is up, then the butler will go back into phase 1 and attack the target player the next time he sees them, even if it's much later in the day. As soon as the butler enters his murder phase, he will put away his broom if he's carrying it and bring out a knife. He will relentlessly chase the target player until he has killed them, outputting 10 damage per hit and hitting every 0.35 seconds, meaning he can kill you as fast as 3.5 seconds. If the butler spots another player, he will immediately go back into phase 1 and act as I explained earlier. If you break line of sight with the butler for 12 seconds, this will also send him back into phase 1, but keep in mind he will immediately attack you the next time he sees you, unless he has found a new target player. If the butler manages to kill the targeted player, he'll sprint away from the crime scene for 15 seconds, then return to phase 1. If the butler spots a player during these 15 seconds, he will enter phase 2, but if that player is able to see the dead body, the butler will consider himself caught red-handed and enter phase 3. As soon as the butler enters his murder phase, from its targeted node, it will consider the node searched and check it off. There also is a pattern behind how the giant targets nodes. Giants will always have a current target and a queued target. The current target is shown in yellow and the queued target is shown in blue. When a giant checks off its current targeted node, it will queue up the next closest node. So in this example, you can see the giant's current target is this node here. Once the giant checks this node off, it will queue up this node because it is the closest node to the one it just checked off. Eventually, this creates a path where the giant will walk back and forth. There is another mechanic in this phase called search width. Giants have a search width of 200 meters, which just means that they can only locate nodes within that range. 200 meters pretty much covers every node outside, but this will change in phase 3, which is why it's important. As soon as a player enters a forest keeper's field of view, this will activate their suspicion meter. Each forest keeper has their own suspicion meter for each player. There are 4 variables that come into play with the suspicion meter: time, distance, stance, and movement. For every second you're standing in line of sight of the giant, your suspicion meter will be rising. The closer you are, the faster the meter will rise, so if you're all the way back here, it will rise much slower than if you're standing right in front of the giant. The last 2 important variables are stance and movement, which work as multipliers. Crouching will increase your suspicion meter 1 times faster, standing will increase your suspicion meter 2 times faster, and moving will add 1 to these multipliers, so if you're crouching and moving, it'll be 2 times faster, and if you're standing and moving, it will be 3 times faster. Just to clarify, there's no difference between walking and sprinting, they're both considered moving. Every player's suspicion meter begins at 0. As soon as your suspicion meter reaches 1, the giant will chase you. Huge shout out to Echo Programs for creating this adjustable graph where we can see exactly how long it takes for your suspicion meter to reach 1. I'm linking this in the description if you'd like to check it out while I show you how it works. X represents distance, which goes up to 70 since that's how far giants can see, and Y represents how many seconds it will take before your suspicion meter is equal to 1. The only variable you want to play with here is S, which represents stance. As I explained before, crouching is equal to 1, standing is equal to 2, and moving is equal to +1. So if I put S equal to 1, that means I'm crouching and not moving. I can scroll along this line and see how long it would take until my suspicion meter reaches 1 at each distance. At, let's say, 50 meters, it would take 10.5 seconds. Now, let's say I'm full sprinting at the same distance. I would change S equal to 3, and now I can see it would take 3.5 seconds before my suspicion meter equals 1. If I close function 5 and open function 1, here I can find out exactly how much my suspicion meter is increasing per second. If I want to check how much it rises while I'm crouching and not moving, I'll change S back to 1, and if we check, let's say 50 meters again, we can see that my suspicion meter is increasing 0.095 per second. So in game, if I'm 50 meters away, crouched and not moving, my suspicion meter rises 0.095 every second that I'm in line of sight of the giant. As soon as my suspicion meter hits 1, the giant will enter his chasing phase. When a giant is in his chasing phase, it will immediately begin sprinting towards the targeted player. In this phase, as long as you're sprinting, you're much faster than the giant, up to about 35 pounds, so if you're carrying items, I suggest dropping them. During this phase, your suspicion meter is still active, and as long as the giant is able to see you, your meter is still rising. The suspicion meter has another feature that I haven't mentioned yet. As long as at least one player is in the Giant's field of view, every other player's suspicion meter is decreasing 0.33 per second. Going back to my previous example, every second my suspicion meter rises, all of my teammates' suspicion meters are decreasing 0.33. Since my teammates' suspicion meters are in the negatives, it will take this Giant much longer to aggro onto them. Remember that each Giant has a suspicion meter for each player, so if a new Giant were to spawn, everyone's suspicion meter would start at 0 for that specific Giant. If a Giant is chasing you, the only way to get him to lose you is to break line of sight for 3 seconds. Since Giants are most commonly found on march, I suggest using trees to hide from them, but you can use pretty much any objects outside. This includes the ship, which is very useful. If the Giant doesn't spot you after 3 seconds, he will enter his final phase. When a Giant enters its searching phase, it will start a 9-second timer. During this timer, the Giant will be non-stop sprinting and use the standard roaming function. However, his search precision increases to 15 and his search width decreases to 25. Since the Giant's search precision is higher, this allows him to check nodes off much sooner. Since the Forest Giant's search width is only 25, he can only see nodes within this range. If the Giant has checked all nodes within this range, then all nodes will reset. This forces the Giant to have a kind of patrolling effect around one area. If a Giant doesn't spot you or any suspicious enough players, it will go back into phase 1. If a Giant manages to catch up to you, he will grab you and eat you. This animation lasts about 5 seconds, and there are ways you can get out of it. If a Giant is stunned by a zap gun, radar booster, or stun grenade, he will drop whatever player he's holding. Radar boosters and stun grenades will stun the Giant for 9 seconds. Be careful if you're the one who stunned or zapped him, because he will track you the entire time he's stunned, which increases your suspicion meter, and then will immediately target you once the effect has worn off. If you teleport a player right when they get grabbed, they will teleport back to ship before getting killed. This is useful if a Giant is camping your ship, because you can have one player bait the Giant far away and have a terminal guy teleport this player right when they get grabbed. Just for some general information, Giants cannot hear you, they can only see you. If you happen to be standing on the Giant while he's spawning, he will grab you and kill you right away. If a Giant touches you at any moment, even if he wasn't chasing you, he will grab you and kill you. And if you're killed by a Giant, you and your items will completely disappear. There are a few different ways you can kill the Forest Giant. The easiest way is to hit it with a shovel, stop sign, or yield sign 30 times. You can shoot it 6 times with a shotgun. If you get lucky enough to hit a Giant with an exploding Easter egg, this will burn him to death. You can kill him with a kitchen knife, and my personal favorite, death by earthworm. We are about to hit 30,000 subscribers. You guys have been going crazy. Keep it up. I'm gonna start streaming next week on Twitch. Go follow me. First link in the description. Bracken. Hazard level A, they take 3 hits to kill, they'll insta-kill you, open doors in 1 second, and are most commonly found on Vow. Brackens have 3 phases: hunting, retreating, and aggro. As soon as a Bracken spawns, it will begin hunting. In this phase, it will crawl around making no sound. It always knows where all players are and what direction they're looking, and it will target the closest player. Once it has chosen a player, it will follow them until it finds an opportunity to kill them. You are slower than the Bracken if you're walking, but you're faster than them if you're sprinting. So if you're sprinting while you're exploring, you'll create distance between you and the Bracken, but the Bracken will continuously close this gap until it gets close enough to snap your neck and kill you. Brackens can be following you for a really long time without you knowing it. It doesn't seem like they get any more aggressive the longer they follow you, but if you know there's a Bracken on your map, it's a good idea to constantly be checking your back just in case. Make sure you don't stop moving and make sure you don't back up, because if you do, you're giving the Bracken a very good chance to kill you. They're really smart when there's 2 levels. This room in particular, they'll hide on the top or bottom level depending on where you are and try to sneak up on you. In this example, the Bracken knows I'm standing right here, so he's going to post up right on these stairs and wait for me to walk through this room. Now, if I were to just walk through without checking the stairs, I wouldn't know he's there, and that's when he's going to continue following me. Here's another example. So I walk through the room and the Bracken comes down the stairs to follow me. If I would have kept walking, the Bracken would have followed me, but since I stopped and there's a second floor, he's going to go back up to that second floor and see if I walk back through this room. As soon as I do walk back through this room, as long as I have my back to him, he's going to come down the stairs and continue following me. They're also very smart in the sewage system. You can see his red dot coming towards me right now, and since I'm looking this way, he doesn't turn the corner, he hides from me. And as soon as I continue to explore, that's when he jumps on me. As I said earlier, Brackens always know what direction you're looking. In this example, the Bracken is right behind me. I turn around to check and he immediately changes direction to sneak up behind me. If he can find another way to come up behind me, he will, but if he can't find a different way, then he will just hide behind the wall. As soon as you look at a Bracken, this will trigger phase 2. When this phase is triggered, you'll hear a sound cue. The Bracken will stand up, growl, flail its flowers, and begin backing up while looking at you. This phase won't be triggered unless the Bracken is within this part of your screen, which is why sometimes you can see the Bracken trying to sneak up on you on the sides of your screen. This retreating phase lasts 23 seconds, where you can hear the Bracken's footsteps as he backs pretty much as far away from you as he can. As soon as that 23-second timer is up, he will go right back into phase 1. Also, the 23-second timer begins the moment you have last broken eye contact with the Bracken. So, if you trigger this phase and chase him down looking at him, the moment you turn away, that's when the timer will start. Or, if you trigger this phase, look away, and then look at him again, this will reset the timer. This is super important. When the Bracken is in this phase, he will never attack you and never kill you. The millisecond you send him into this phase, no matter how close he is, you can turn your back to him. The only time he'll kill you in this phase is if you get too close. Looking at the Bracken too long will send him into phase 3. This phase is really complex. Shout out to Agmas from my Discord. He read through a ton of code for the Bracken and basically translated it for me, so everything I'm about to say is backed by code. I wouldn't have this information if it wasn't for him. Links to his socials in the description. Go blow him up. This phase works based off the Bracken's anger meter, which works kind of like a timer and can be increased through a variety of things. The moment you look at a Bracken and send him into phase 2, this will immediately add to his anger meter. This number increases based on how many times you sent him into phase 2. So the first time you send him into phase 2, it will add a little bit to his anger meter. The second time, it will add a little more to his anger meter. The third time will add more, and so on and so forth. You'll also add to the Bracken's anger meter if you look at him while he's in what's called the stare down mode. This mode happens when you're looking at a Bracken while he's retreating. He has basically a random chance of entering stare down mode, where he will stop and stare at you, and for every millisecond you're looking at him while he's standing still, this is adding to his anger meter. Just to clarify, looking at the Bracken while he's retreating does not add to his anger meter. It's only when he's in the stare down mode you're adding to his anger meter. When the Bracken is in stare down mode, this is when there's a chance of him getting aggroed onto you. The higher his anger meter is, the higher the chance he is to get aggroed. When a Bracken does get aggroed, he'll chase you until he either kills you or his anger meter completely depletes. So if his anger meter is low, he won't chase you for very long, but if it's high, he can chase you for up to 10 or 11 seconds. So here's an in-game example of how the anger meter works. When I first turn around and look at the Bracken, this immediately adds to his anger meter. Now, as long as he's walking, even if I'm looking at him, this is not adding to his anger meter, but as soon as he enters stare down mode, then I am. So he should enter their stare down mode, and I was just adding to his anger meter. Now, the higher his anger meter is, the more likely he is to aggro onto me. So this next time he enters stare down, I have a pretty high chance of him aggroing onto me, and as you can see, he does. And he chases me until his aggro meter completely depletes, and now it starts back at 0. Keep in mind that the progress on the anger meter saves, so right there he just went into stare down mode and I increased his anger meter. If I were to walk away and continue exploring, that progress on his anger meter saves. A couple things you should note is that if you stun, zap, or hit a Bracken, this will automatically aggro them and max out their anger meter at 11 seconds, and if they are aggroed, they will always go for the closest player. When a Bracken does kill someone, he pretty much goes back into his retreating phase, but he'll drag the body with him going at twice the speed. Once the 23 seconds is over, he'll drop the body and go back into phase 1. If you're chasing the Bracken in this phase, he can drop the body early and try to kill you. If you are playing against a Bracken, just make sure you're checking your back often, make sure you're clearing rooms, especially rooms with 2 floors, and make sure you're closing doors, because if a Bracken is following you, you'll hear it open doors. I wouldn't recommend trying to kill a bracken, but if you are, you can one-shot him with a shotgun, or you can hit him 3 times with a shovel. The best way to kill him with a shovel is to lure him near a big